I have never felt comfortable with my own sexuality. It was always the strange thing that I wanted so very to explore. Because in order for you to really understand yourself, you have to be able to experience the touch of another person. One time a girl who was a friend of mine gave me an experience that changed how I saw my own sexuality. It was the first time that I felt attractive, but I still had questions. I decided to find out why it is perceived to be the last taboo. I have cerebral palsy, which basically means that I don't have total control over my muscles. That means everything still works down there.
I have arthrogryposis, which is amyoplasia, which is that's the specific form of it, and it's a congenital orthopedic condition that mostly affects muscle growth and also joint flexibility and atrophy.
My disability is mild cerebral palsy, and then secondary is chronic pain.
And then I was born with lumbar sacral agenesis, which means that I was born without my last 5 vertebrae. So, like, from my hips to my ribs, there's no bones, which is why I can do this without my ass leaving the seat. Ass stretch.
My disability is called arthrogryposis. It affects about 1 in 3,000 people, and it's you're born with it. So basically, it's a joint condition. So all my joints and ligaments are really tight, and my muscles are weak and underdeveloped. My bones are, slightly weak. So what you get is a lot of contractures. So for instance, my jaw is actually contracted, so I can't open my mouth very wide. My hips are both dislocated. All of my joints are all kinds of messed up.
So I talk about people with disabilities as experts. I'm really good at living with my disability. I know exactly what it is, I know exactly what it means, and I know exactly how I adapt to it for what I do in the world. So that makes me an expert. I'm not unable. I'm actually very able in the context of being somebody who happens to not be able to walk because of the injury that I had 37 years ago.
My first word was squirrel. I think my next word was mom, and my word after that was disability. It was a word that I needed to be able to articulate something that was going on with my body. It just means limited ability. Like my physical ability is limited in specific ways. I think that's the reason why I personally don't actually like the word disability to describe what's going on with me, because it's not specific enough, I guess, because it just sounds like my ability is dissed. Like,
I guess when someone asks, what's your definition of disability? My thought is it has to do with, your body or your mind or what have you, acting in a somewhat, different way than, is out of society's standard. So you just go about things a little bit differently.
The problem with the word disability is that it has a negative connotation from the get-go. It automatically implies that there's something that somebody can't or something that somebody isn't. And that becomes defining a foundational definition of the way somebody thinks of somebody, and then it spills over into everything, including sexuality.
I think one of the things that defines beauty in general to people tends to be a little normative. So people will look at something and they think it's beautiful if it falls under certain guidelines, and they've really strictly defined that. And I think that is definitely what puts so much stigma on the idea of someone with a disability being a sexual person, because people can't quite connect the dots between the idea that someone has a non-normative body or presentation and the fact that they might be sexual. And I think the same runs true for people who are really overweight or, just, look in some way different from that idealized, commercialized view of what attractive people are.
I walked up until I was 17. The only two things I couldn't do was ice skate or ride a bike. At 17, a bunch of surgery was done to make me normal. I don't really know. It was so my legs would be straight and I would walk better and all that stuff. And it literally, they cut everything from the hips down with, bolt cutters. It wasn't pretty. And 17, because I was almost 18 when this happened. That's a really crucial time, I would think. And, so, meanwhile, I had no clue about my body anymore, because it was someone just took off my legs and put someone else's legs on. I had no idea anything, really. And it really screwed with my sense of sexuality and beauty, like you said earlier. Because,
and identity, yeah.
And identity, because I lost everything. Anything I thought I was completely got shattered, not knowing, and being so poked and prodded. And when I would bring up stuff to the doctor, who was male, always a male, you're like, well, what about sex, and what about babies, and why are you thinking like that? That's never going to happen for you. That's not even, on his radar. And I'm like, but I'm 18, and at some point I thought I wanted family, and, but, so, a lot of that is not addressed medically at all, so that kind of screwed me up for a while, mentally, as far as beauty, because I kind of got it twisted in my head, well, it's just flesh, it means nothing, and it's just flesh, so why treat it nice?
One of my first opinions of myself as a person with a disability who was sexual or who hoped to be sexual one day was that no one was gonna find me sexually attractive. That was a really big thing. So holding myself to this really specific, almost scary standard, needing to be as groomed and as femmy and as presentable as possible, because for me it was less forgivable to not look good, because my disability and whatever else I thought was weird about my body, being one of the only black kids in my school, all this different stuff was ways that I was all right, well, I have to make up for it, and I think that what I didn't realize is that it's not all about people finding you sexually attractive. I was once I realized that people did find me attractive, I thought that my world would open up and it would be great and everything would be awesome once people thought I was hot. And then I realized that people can think you are hot and still objectify you and not think of you as a person and not actually really want to be in a relationship with you and not take you home to mom and dad and not see you as a real relationship potential at all. So I started this, once I realized that I could fuck people, I started this mantra of but I'm not girlfriend potential.
So beauty for me is more something that catches my eye or makes me feel something or makes me think of a certain differently than I would. Something that makes me think is beautiful, because I'm thinking outside the box or seeing something different than what it is.
I identify as pansexual, which most people don't really know about it, haven't really heard of it. Basically, pan is a prefix that essentially means all-encompassing. And so pansexual kind of refers to someone who is attracted to pretty much anybody. So for me, I don't define myself as bisexual because I'm not just attracted to a cisgendered female and cisgendered males. I'm attracted to people of all different genders, including transgendered individuals, androgynous individuals, genderqueer, genderfucked, everybody. So for me, it doesn't really matter what's between the legs so much as it matters what's between the ears.
So much of what people want to believe about boys, you know, is that we're strong in a really specific kind of way, is that we can provide, is that we can take care of people, is that we can lift heavy boxes and mow the lawn. I guess it's been, I don't know, just like interesting being able to like think of myself as a boy who is abject from that, as a boy who is definitely not inside of this like prescribed idea of like what a boy should be, not only because I look like a girl in certain ways or am perceived as a girl, but also because even if I take testosterone, even if I, you know, like do all of these like medical things that are going to change my appearance in really intense ways, even if I do those things, I'm still going to be disabled, you know? I'm still going to be a physically disabled boy. I'm still not going to be able to like, you know, always top someone in bed or like pick them up and throw them over my shoulder and carry them away to my cave, you know? Like those are not things that like I'm going to be able to do. So me interacting with someone sexually as you know, as a certain kind of male person still needs to acknowledge my disability. And I think that there are really interesting ways that people conceptualize disability as feminizing you and also infantilizing you.
I remember that night very clearly. Our bodies were up against each other, and it felt great, you know, because that's all we were, just two bodies connecting in that single moment.
In 1973, I was 18 years old, and I fell out of a tree from 25 feet up and broke 2 vertebrae in my spine, and it compressed my spinal cord. And with a spinal cord injury, the brain can't communicate below the level of that injury to the cord. But my level of injury is pretty low, which is why I have full use of my arms and my upper body and my hips. So that's the way my body is working. I'm not actually paralyzed from the waist down, I'm paralyzed from the thighs down. So it's different for each person. So after my injury, I had surgery to repair my spine and a stay in the hospital, and then I did 7 weeks of rehabilitation. And that was a really important part of this whole experience because they taught me how to live with my paralysis. They taught me wheelchair skills, they taught me how to dress myself, they taught me things about the way I needed to take care of my body and deal with changes in my body, and they made me strong. After 7 weeks in the rehabilitation hospital, I went home, and that was my first experience of starting to be out in public and sense how people were reacting to me, but also how I was feeling about the way people were reacting to me. And that was the bigger part. I wanted credit for having been a walking person. At first, it was an adjustment process of integrating my own sense of myself as a person with a disability, because my point of reference was still, I was a walking person. You know, I'm one of you, everybody. This isn't actually who I really am.
I think that people in general, this can't be said for everybody, but I think people in general associate disabilities with not only a physical involvement, but a mental involvement in a lot of cases. For example, we have several friends with CP, and when they talk, I do see people in public who almost immediately get an expression on their face that to me reads, I think that your mental faculties are not what mine are.
We're seen as having so many issues, and we have to be pitied, and, my legs don't work. Why would I think about sex? Which is just, so for me, like, it's so disconnected. But for an able-bodied person who doesn't either experience disability or doesn't, interact with people who experience disability, that's, like, it makes sense to them. If your body doesn't work the way theirs does, then you must not be interested in sex. I don't get it, because I'm on the other side of that.
I do think there's pressure to not view people with disabilities as sexual. I remember going to a concert with my little brother. And my little brother, he is as gung-ho about disability rights and equality as, anyone I've ever met in a chair, even though he's, able-bodied. Because he grew up with me and seeing, how I got around, and that's normal to him, And the idea that other people would, want me to, wouldn't care about me doing stuff was just so foreign to him. And we went and saw this concert, and he brought one of his friends along, and I drove the both of them. And sitting in front of us was a girl I played basketball with, who I hadn't seen in ages and all that kind of stuff. And then once I dropped my brother's friend off at home, it said it was funny seeing Amanda there. And David's like, yeah, man, she got hot. And I was like, oh, really? Yeah, what'd Mike say? It's like, dude, I didn't say that to Mike. The most regular time you do see disability or people with disabilities in a sexual way, it's always this fetishization.
There are people who are turned on by disability, and they're called devotees. There are couples in the world where one person actually is stimulated by the disability of the other person, and they're completely honest and open and completely understand it, and nobody's being forced to do anything, and it works for them. But like any sexuality, it's that communication and honesty that counts. And what happens with devotees is that it can be very unhealthy, it can be very dangerous, because some of those people, they actually want to cast that person with a disability in a certain role. So people with disabilities have got to be careful of this. They have got to be a little more discerning about the people that they're with and why that person might be choosing to be with them, and to be able to say, no, I'm out of here, if they sense that that's what's going on. It's another unfortunate social stereotype that, oh, somebody with a disability has got somebody who's willing to have sex with them, so you better stick around and put up with anything because you might not find another partner, right? Which is really an insulting way to think about people with disabilities, as it is for anybody.
I think when it comes to sexuality and, what your aid helps with and what your aid doesn't help with, it really depends on the person and their disability. I have friends with cerebral palsy and other disabilities who, cannot help themselves to masturbate. And, if that was something that was comfortable between the client and the aide, then I would not judge it. For me, the only times I've been sexually involved with any of my aides was when they were actually partners prior to becoming my aide. There has to be a very distinct, when you're here to aid, you are here, it is a job. I reserve the right outside of our relationship to redirect or, fire if need be, make adjustments, ask you to redo something, as I would basically your employer. However, then when those hours of aiding are over, then those hours of aiding are over.
I have no feelings with, kissing or stuff like that. So she kind of leaned over and talking about it, I was like, whoa, this is pretty weird. I kind of like it.
People are scared. They don't know what they're dealing with and what people don't understand. I mean, it's an old adage, but it's true. What people don't know scares them, and they're not sure how it's going to work. Do you have feeling there? What does your disability mean to how we can be involved sexually? And is it just going to be really horrifyingly awkward? Am I going to feel guilty? And all of these things, people, unfortunately, a lot of people are not only scared, but sometimes selfish in the sense that they think, I don't want to deal with it. They don't see people with disabilities as potentials for long-term partners. And they certainly don't see, I think, people with disabilities as potentials for flings or, affairs or things like that, because they think, this should be easy. If I'm going to have a one-night stand with somebody, I'm going to have a one-night stand with them and then walk away and not have to feel like responsible or guilty or et cetera. And I think that the idea of adding a disability to that makes people feel guilty. And that's one of the things in society that just needs to change.
My first introductions to sexuality didn't really have a lot of room for dialogue or a lot of room for consensuality or a lot of room for like body positivity, like any of that stuff. It was really a lot to do with like, okay, so, if you're cute enough for me to sleep with you, we'll do that thing. But I, didn't feel the room to be able to be like, well, my body can do this thing, but it can't do this thing, or like that hurts, or like this doesn't feel good, but this feels good, which are all things that I definitely care about being able to communicate now. I met him once he was in middle school, and I was in high school, and he and a group of his friends stopped me walking down the street and surrounded me and asked me if I was a lesbian because I had a rainbow button on my purse, and I told them I wasn't, and they all surrounded me and started grabbing at me, and one of them jumped onto the back of my wheelchair and grabbed my chest and held on really tight and were like, do you like that? Do you like that? You're a lesbian, do you like that? And I remember being like, okay, this is not gonna happen right now. And as much as I was scared in that moment, I was like, this is not gonna happen. And I turned my wheelchair on. I was in my motorized wheelchair. And I said, you're gonna need to get off now. And I turned my speed up all the way, and I just started driving as fast as I could with this kid on my fucking back, holding on to my fucking boobs, like, no. I'm like, oh, you can't talk as good now that I'm driving, can you? And then we got to the end of the road, and there was a huge step, probably this tall. My chair just caught air, and this kid fell off the back, and then I went back around, and he was still on the sidewalk, and I went back up the curb cut and came back and just ran over his feet and legs a few times while he screamed, and then I got a coffee.
For the first time, I really felt like someone really wanted me in that way.
So the feeling that I wasn't going to be considered as a sexual partner was a tough thing to face. The sense that women were looking at me and not reacting to me in that way as a possible partner. And I was struggling with this anyway, before my injury.
One time I went out with some friends in New York, and Ellie, our friend Ellie, came along too. And Ellie's able-bodied.
Okay.
And then it was myself, Pete, who uses a chair, and Wally, who's blind. And everyone was talking to Ellie about how great she was for bringing us out that night.
Oh, all right. Well, that.
And I was like, hey, I'm the one that drove and paid her cover, all right? Like, what the hell? And everyone was like, wow, it's so nice of you. And then they continued to hit on her as if she didn't come here with 3 guys.
And so, like, these cisgendered boys, you know, who were often able-bodied, who were often able to carry me up and down stairs and stuff, you know. If I didn't want to be with them necessarily, if I didn't want to be sexual with them, what would that mean, you know, for my future of partnerships? Like, is it possible for me to try to take on a different sort of sexual role as a disabled person when so much of my relationships to people has had to do with dependence?
So, this girl over here and I were together for 3.5 years. And I'll tell the story of basically the point at which we decided we were no longer just friends and we were going to be in a quote-unquote relationship.
Well, in our relationship, when I first got involved with Lauren, we had actually not been talking for some time. I was going through something very personal at the time involving my gender identity and my orientation, and she had approached me about it and offered a lot of support and openness, which was something that a lot of other people weren't willing to do at the time.
Then a mutual friend who happened to be my roommate actually came to me and said, yeah, so Aaron is no longer Aaron. Aaron is a he. Aaron is now Shay. And so I was like, that seems like a difficult road to go alone. That's cool though. So I sent Aaron a message on Facebook and I said, I sent Shay a message. And I said, what up? And despite our past, you know, it sounds like you're going through some tough things. I just want to let you know, like, if you need somebody to talk to or whatever, I'm here. Shay responded, and basically we, you know, went out for coffee or something like that, some cliche thing. Started talking. Then somehow Shay became my aide, and we were talking more.
We were working closely together and had to stay somewhere overnight. And there was one bed in the hotel room, which was terrifyingly awkward.
So, you know, we're laying down, going to bed. Shay turns to me, says, have you ever been kissed? I was like, no. Shay says, oh. And then he kisses me.
I had kind of wanted to broach the subject of potentially being involved in some way in a relationship with her anyway, so I cheated and used the fact that there was only one bed to kind of, you know, be all snuggly and stuff.
I knew that the world didn't view me as a viable option for a real relationship, and you know, I've been crushing on this guy, and you know, it was like just hoping that something would happen, and I didn't have the confidence to try to make anything happen, and then, you know, it happened, and you know, it was dorky and cute and cliche and wonderful all at the same time, and it was perfect, and you know, like the next week he moved in. You know, and then eventually somehow we got back around to Aaron, and you know, that was kind of, I think, both of our favorite stories. Certainly a defining story.
takes my hand and puts it on her bed, and she says, feel these, feel this is real.
My first serious relationship was with Matthew, and we met playing wheelchair basketball with the city of Philadelphia. There was only 2 teams in the area, one in North Jersey and one in Philly. We just met playing basketball at 17.
And the first time we actually had sex lasted very quickly. Not for the usual reasons, though.
I remember you did, yeah. Not, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we were just doing the usual. Just messing around on the floor. And you, like, I was on my back, and then you hopped on, slid in, and then you had to hop. You hopped off in, like, what, 10 seconds or so?
A little bit longer than that. At least 2 minutes.
What?
Yeah. I was stuck. I couldn't get back off, so I was trying to figure out how to get off.
Yeah. There was that. Okay.
Yeah, so like 2 minutes, and he fell asleep afterwards.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well that was it. That was sex. That's what everybody talks about for like ever, and that was it. Wow. I was misled. Yeah, by the end of the week we were like, all right, let's have sex 2, 3, 4 times a day. We're good. Like, it was crazy. It was like, first time, end of the week is like, I need to buy stock and Durex.
I think that queer sex, being able to have queer sex and opening myself up to queer sex and feeling good about it has been a lot about what has taught me about how to have sex both with a different body and with different bodies, because you already are thinking about new ways that you do things. You're already thinking outside of this like normative paradigm of like missionary position. This is how people have sex, you know? Rain lived in the dorms my second year at Hampshire. She was the first year. I remember the first time that we ever like spent the night together. It was really, really lovely, and the whole night, like we didn't have like sex at all. It was really just like about breath and about skin and about fingernails and biting and like exploring differences between convex and concave, like moving with each other. And it was so cool because the whole time she kept saying, is this okay? Is this okay? Is this okay? And I was like, what are you doing? Where I come from, people don't talk during sex. I was like, why do you keep asking me if it's okay? Of course it's okay. I'm making good sounds. But it was awesome. It was really good. And that was like one of my first introductions to like what consensual intimacy could be.
You know, a lot of times you had to look at things and think very hard about whether it was going to work ahead of time, or at least be willing to finagle once you were there to make it work by adjusting things a lot before you could really get going. And especially if you're dealing with somebody who has chronic pain or a lot of pain, I think a lot of people have this weird assumption that, or maybe it's not weird, I just think it is because I'm used to it, that they're gonna break you. You know, if you have a disability and I'm rough with you, I'm gonna hurt you really badly. And so they're not willing to kind of be a little rough. And especially if your partner likes those things, there is definitely some hesitancy. So, you know, you kind of have to learn what that person's boundaries are, what is painful to them specifically and what's not. So we did a lot of that as well, you know, where I had to make adjustments for things that wouldn't hurt me at all, but hurt her.
So every person's disability has a different kind of impact on their sexuality, and spinal cord injury has a very specific effect on the nervous system and what is possible for somebody to feel or how their body functions. So for me, I was injured in the part of the spinal cord which is exactly right in the area where sexual innervation takes place. And so for me, I lost sensation on the surface of my penis. I have internal sensation, but the surface I have very, very little. And it stops right at the base of my groin. So it's sort of a cruel design of God's that that part of the spinal cord and nerves happen to be built in the way where that's right where it stops. And also my ability to ejaculate was affected by this. But I had to find out for myself what all of this meant. The first thing I was concerned about was, what can I do? And will I be able to enjoy the experience? I already knew I was a great kisser, so I had that to go on, you know, that nothing was going to affect that. And I knew that my partners that I made out with, you know, enjoyed it, but I was becoming an adult, so I needed to explore more, and that was scary for me. I didn't know how that was going to happen. And I couldn't do a great deal to satisfy myself because of the way my body is wired now, that all that rehearsing that I did for all those years preparing for intercourse really wasn't the same kind of option, wasn't really a source of a lot of enjoyment for me anymore. I really needed somebody to explore my sexuality with me. It took a couple of years until I connected with somebody who I had known, a girl that I had known in high school, and hadn't seen her in a long time. We were never friends or really attracted, but we saw each other at a friend's wedding, a mutual friend's wedding, and something did connect, and we started spending some time together, and we kissed, and the thing happened, which is what has to happen, chemistry.
For me, being on all fours works really well. I really like that. I've always been really good at crawling. I crawled for a really long time before I walked. And flipping being on my back and flipping my legs over someone's lower back so that their legs are going this way. And like if this is someone's torso and flipping my legs this way works really well. I really like laying on my back also and having someone lift the lower half of me up, whether for someone going down on me or for penetrative sex is really cool. Having sex in my wheelchair is rad. That works in lots of ways. Sideways over the two wheels, over back, doing wheelies, doing different things. Great, love it.
In Lauren's case, both of us are a little larger. For an able-bodied person, that may not be such a big deal because your hips move. But because of her specific disability, her hips don't move and they don't flex quite as wide, for example, as mine do. So when you're thinking about, this is a vibrator, what am I gonna do with it? Your average able-bodied person doesn't have an issue with that, even if they're heavy. But when your hips don't move and you have to, figure out how you're gonna use something like that, you have to adapt it a lot. So what we learned is, for example, the longer it is, the better it works. We learned that she can't do anything that requires her legs to be elevated for too long because of her circulation. So, in cases where, we're doing something that's a little kinky or whatever, and we're trying to, tie her up, tie her down, you have to think hard about, where am I gonna put the knot in the rope so that it's not causing swelling or other problems that would cut off her circulation. There was one case where we actually ended up getting a separate piece of furniture, that was inflatable, so that she could put it under her hips, so that she could lay on her stomach and it would work out all right. Stuff like that.
One of the things about having a disability is that you can't have the normal, it just happens thing. You have to talk through every little thing.
A relationship began to bloom, that we enjoyed being with each other, that we got to a place of acknowledging mutual attraction to each other. And she was the first woman that I found that I could trust, who was really willing to go there with me to find out what my body was capable of and what would work and what I could do that could please her. And once I got over that boundary, that was huge. It became more and more about just me and my personal growth as an individual in a relationship, and less about my body and my disability.
She changed my mindset on disability and sexual orientation and all of that stuff so drastically that I don't think, I'm not even sure the word love is necessarily appropriate. I don't think there will ever be a time when I don't love her and when I don't feel like she's part of my family and don't want her around. In that, sense that this is somebody who's part of my life and who has changed me, I hope, for the better forever.
I think that, I don't know, the only way that I've been able to, come to those conclusions and feel better about the way that I'm having sex and problem solving is by having good partners. And that took a really long time, when you're rushing to just find anyone to have sex with in order to either just relieve an urge or feel good about yourself. There's so many reasons why you want to just rush off and have sex. I get it, I understand. You're also resolving yourself to having not as good experiences, because for me so much of sex has to do with communication and has to do with being able to say what you want and what you don't want, and be able to take the time to say my body does this, it doesn't do this well, I want to try that, I would love to have sex upside down, but that means you're gonna have to hold my legs up while I hang there and stuff. And I've done lots of cool stuff now, but it's because I was with one person for a while and we experimented and communicated, and there were a lot of things I thought that I couldn't do that I can do with help.
To me, I was oh, it's a good thing, I had that relationship with you because,
Right.
We're a good match and all. And then as I've gotten older, it's what, actually, that's really what sex should be like for everybody, That shouldn't just be a disability thing, is that you're, listen to each other a lot and try new things and figure, go along the way.
I think prior to becoming sexually active, I had a lot more issues of self-confidence than I do now. I still have lots of them. My issues are a big knot of string, and you pull at one and the rest of the issues get tighter, and then you pull at another and the rest of the issues get tighter, including the one that you just loosened. I still have lots of self-confidence issues. However, just the fact that I was able to have this loving relationship and essentially a family with someone, I feel like during that time I felt like I was worthy of experiencing that. And since we've split, I have had somewhat of a relapse in terms of going back to feeling just a cripple. Who's gonna want me?
We have to, put aside the image that we have in our mind of the perfect type. If you start to say, oh, I only like this type, I only go for that type, who you could end up with.
To me, disability is frequently a self-identified thing, and I, would want it to be a self-identified thing, but I don't think that I don't think that non-disabled folks tend to think of it as something you would ever want to identify yourself as, which is really interesting. Whereas like sexual orientation, gender, race are all considered things that like you would want to assert and like be proud of and have be a part of your daily life and daily existence and daily interaction. Whereas like a disability is something you want to like minimize as much as possible because it's a problem. It's not hot. It's not sexy. You can't dress it up. You can't look cute with it. You can't dance with it, but you can do all of those things.
To me, the whole relationship was always defined by the fact that I thought that it was really unfair and uncool that she had all of this sort of neurosis about the fact that nobody would want to be with her, which to me was just ridiculous because I didn't associate the disability with the relationship. And it was because, who she was as a person trumped, appearance or disability or any of those other things.
Did you know what your mouth would be good for?
Oh my god.
Because you got a big mouth.
No, it's not about the size. It's not about the size. It's his head. It's
Oh, it's the head.
Yeah.
So, how does that work? When you...
I've
So
said
you're
it
saying
before,
because his head, because of his cerebral palsy, his head moves.
Yeah, no, all you have to
What
do
happens?
is all you have to do is wait till he goes down on you, and then you say, "Hey, Alex," and he'll go, and it'll work out real well.